How's it going, everyone? My name is Jake, and I'm back with another mix walkthrough. Today we're going to be taking a look at the guitar and the horn section of this jazz piece. In the last two episodes, we looked at the drums and kind of talked about the importance of the cymbals in a jazz tune. Then in the last episode, we talked about the upright bass and how it kind of differs from the electric bass in mixing. And finally, we've kind of talked about the application of compression to this specific genre, which differs from, general pop music. So today we're going to be taking a look at the guitar and the trumpet and putting in the final elements of this piece and kind of preparing ourselves for the final polish. But before we get into this video, I want to know from any viewer what would make these videos better. What would make this information more understandable and easier to apply to your mixes? So let me know if you like my content. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe, turn on notifications. I've got a bunch of ideas, and any feedback will help me to create better, more informative content for you. So without further ado, let's get into this mix here. We're going to start by taking a look at the guitar here. The guitar kind of takes more of a presence as a rhythmic instrument. So what I might end up doing, I think would be a good idea, is to see how it sounds by adding it to our parallel compression track that we created last episode, which will help the guitar, bass, and drums kind of come together and within one dynamic range and kind of really create a strong rhythm section for those horns to sit on top of. So before we do any of that, let's kind of add some EQ here. I'm just going to get a good portion of the song to listen to. Awesome. So let's pull up our EQ7 band. Handy dandy subtractive EQ here. And what I'm going to be doing a lot with this portion of the mix is listening to it in relation to everything else. So I'm going to be listening while the drums and bass are continuing, because we want the guitar to sit appropriately. We'll start with our high pass filter. I'm going to bring it up to start where we start to hear it. I'm liking it around there, because if I go any lower, some of those lower, muddier frequencies are coming through, and by taking those out, we're leaving more room for the bass and the kick, which is definitely something we want to do. Let's move up to our low frequency sweeps. Bring it up to 10. Has some weird sonic characteristics going on there, so I'm going to take some of that out. And it seemed to be affecting a little bit more, so I'm going to actually increase the Q so that it affects a wider range of frequencies, but these just not quite as much. Let's move up to our low mids. That adds a little bit of like a hollow sounding frequency, so I'm going to bring that out around 3 dB. Maybe a little more, even up to 4 dB. And then move up to our mid frequencies. Always just listening to anything that is essentially not part of the natural guitar sound. Something that essentially makes the guitar sound less clear or adds certain sonic characteristics that don't correlate with the actual sound. Swept past something there that didn't sound great. Right there. Take out about 3 dB of that. Let's move up to our high mids here. So, and I always try to, just when trying to speed up this process, I always kind of pay attention to where I was sweeping with the last band. And I know I went up to around 1K and didn't hear much, so I'm going to start around 1K here, so I don't have to go back from 700 to 1K, because I know there's not a lot there that's hurting us. Be a good spot to look for boosts. Seems to be a lot going on there, so I'm going to take that down about 4 dB, and what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to lower this Q to affect a bit more. Finally, let's take a look at our highs. Very whistly. I'm gonna try to pinpoint that. Yeah, it's very whistly, so I'm gonna bring that down. Now I'm only gonna bring it down around 3 dB, because I don't want to be taking out too much of this high end, because I definitely want the guitar to fill up this higher end of the frequency spectrum. So I am gonna lower this Q a little bit too. Let's take a listen. So I'm gonna solo this for you guys. So without it. Really listen to how kind of muddy that low end sounds. Really just takes out a lot of those frequencies, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now let's see what we can add here. Definitely want to keep this up so that we can reference it and know what we need to boost, what ranges we need to boost to kind of fill in. I don't want another EQ7 band, that's for sure. Something that might be interesting is this Sun EQ here. I just did a free plugin review, so I'll put a card up in the top right hand of the screen if you want to check that out. It's a pretty awesome EQ, but I think I'm going to grab the virtual mix rack here because I need more bands. All right, let's see here. So our first range that we want to look at, it's probably around 484 to 695 here, because this is such a small area, this 308 to 487, and the Q is also a little bit larger, so there's not a lot of room to boost there. So let's check out, let's start at 500 here. I do want to find something to kind of bring up that lower end of the guitar. Give it a little bit more warmth. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give this a go here, the 308 to 484. See if we find anything. You almost want, when you're boosting it by 15 dB, you must want it to be subtle, because if it's subtle, you know it's actually it's a very natural frequency in relation to the sound that's recorded. So that's what we're looking for, subtle changes with this. with this boost. And that's what I'm hearing around here. I like that. Without. With. Really listen to that low end of the guitar and it comes up again and it just makes it sound warmer. So I'm pretty fond of that. I'm going to move on to, let's see, around 695 to 1.7K. Hopefully we'll find something in there to kind of refill that body. So we start at 700. Right there. Finally, I'm actually gonna apply a little bit of a different technique. If you watched the first episode, you'd see I used this air EQ here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a little bit of this here to the guitar. Very subtle amount, I think, but just to kind of make the guitar shine a little bit. So I'm going to bring that up. And we're going to start around 3.1K. This is great for just adding a little bit more shimmer to your mixes. See what we did here. So without, just clears it up a lot more and kind of gives it its own space. So I think that's a pretty solid EQ job right there. Now we want to kind of bring it into the rest of the piece here. So like I said, I think what I'm going to do, instead of giving its own compression, is I am going to send this track to our parallel compression and essentially adjust its level through this here. So I'm going to start by keeping it at 0. I think I'm going to bring it down, however. Oops, gonna mute those. I'm gonna bring it down here a little bit because I'm just trying to equal out the level. Awesome. And so now add these final instruments. So what we're going to start doing is soloing this trumpet and the rest of the tracks. Actually, just going to mute the sax. Bring up our EQ7 band. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. It's a bit loud. Gotta make sure it's on a bell here. I'm gonna bring up our high pass filter to start. Very, very based around this high frequency content, as you can tell, because I'm really cranking this up to almost 400 hertz here without very little change. However, I do want some of that low end, so I'm going to keep it around 300 hertz here. Let's look at our sweeps. Bring up 10. Nothing much going on there, so I am going to bring this back down, move up to our low mids. Going to start around 500. There's some interesting things going on there, so I'm going to take a little bit out. Lower the Q. I'm going to move away from the solo because the solo is actually very much higher in level. So we're going to go back to like a normal part here just so we can hear the normal trumpet part. Move to our mid frequencies here. Just a little bit right there, and then I'm going to want to take out even just 2 dB. Move up to our high mids. Kind of whistly there. Take a little bit of that out. I'm gonna increase this Q here. We moved up to our high mids, or just our high frequencies. It's almost a little airy, so I'm going to take out some of that there. Just takes out some of that obnoxious whistling that was in the trumpet recording there. So I'm going to move on to our boost here. Kind of want to try to thicken it up a little bit, as well as add a little bit to the high end. So I think what we're going to be doing is something similar to what we did with the guitar. Gonna pull up our FGS, I believe. And we want to bring up our EQ7 band to reference what we took out. I'm going to start by looking at 300 to 637 because I remember there wasn't much there, so there should be some opportunity to boost. Kind of give the trumpet a little bit more warmth. All right. It's very subtle, so what I'm going to do is end up bringing this up. I do like that though. And it's interesting because a lot of people, are usually hesitant to do something like this. But in this case, when you have not a lot of frequency content down there in general, and you hear something like this 350 hertz that's really not affecting the trumpet all that much, boosting it this much, all it does is give it warmth. And just listen to the sound. I think it very much benefits it. So without it, just really gives it some warmth. So I really like that. I'm going to bring back up that EQ7 band to reference. Maybe add something between 637 and 1.1K. Start at 650 here. Nothing there that I'm too fond of. A lot of that seems adding a bit more coloration to it. Nothing that I sticking out. So I'm going to refrain from adding anything in that spectrum. Let's take a look at 1.1K though to, let's see, 2.4K here. Start at 1.2K. And right now I'm already thinking, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up this air EQ here, and we're going to add some air to a frequency maybe around 2.3K to 4.6K. And what that's going to do is essentially brighten up some of the milder frequencies in the trumpet instead of adding too much shimmer, because like I said, when we were doing our subtractive EQ here, I was seeing a lot of issues with whistly type sounds coming from the higher end. So we want to steer clear from that, but I'm thinking there's not going to be a lot of that between 2.3 and 4.6K. So we're going to start boosting around 2.5K here. Bring that up to 1.4. Looking for subtle changes. Awesome. Let's see what we did with our EQ. See if we like what we did. I like it. Let's see what we got total. Move on to our saxophone here. And I think the biggest thing with the saxophone is what we're going to try to do is give it its own space from the trumpet. So what we want to do is pull up our trumpet EQs. Actually, we're gonna start by doing some subtractive EQ. We don't have to, we can just take out what we need to before we even start boosting. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing exactly, so I'm going to end up soloing this here just so I know what I'm doing. There's a lot of like breath noise below that, so I'm really gonna bring that up. So it seems like there actually is more low frequency content going on here than there was with the trumpet, so we want to make sure we're not taking that out. Nice warm sounding low ends. Awesome. We'll move on to our sweeps here. There's just a little bit of weird stuff going on there. A little bit of honkiness. So I'm just going to take out a little bit of that. Just take out a little bit of that as well. Ooh, right there. Trying to pinpoint that sound there. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to just take out about 4 dB of this and really kind of lower that Q so that it affects a decent amount here. Start with our high mids. I'm going to even bring out a little bit more of that. mids or higher frequencies. Right there. I'm just going to take out a little bit of that. It's not too bad. It's just a little bit whistly. So let's see what we got. Alright, that's not too bad. Helps a little bit. Seems like there's a lot of issues going on with this saxophone here. But let's see if we can add anything back in that's going to help us. I am happy with that low end, so I'm not going to look to boost too much. However, we do want to start looking at the trumpet and see what we boosted here so that we don't have too much and we can really contrast the two. Might look to boost around 630. So we have 637 and 1.1K here. That would fit in between. So we're going to look maybe around 1.1K to boost here. Bring up our FGS. This would make good for contrast against the trumpet. Seems like 1.02K is a bit more subtle, so I'm going to bring that up about 4 dB. Let's see here. What do we got next? We got around 2.3K, which is taken out from the trumpet. 4.6K. What did we do over here? So that will... Wow, we took out the same exact frequency from the saxophone and the trumpet. That's pretty funny. I think we're going to look around 2.3K to boost with the saxophone here. Listening for just subtlety. That sounds best. Awesome. Thinking that's sounding pretty good. Let's see what we got. So I think the last thing that we're going to need to do here in this episode is, I think what we're going to do is bring ourselves our trumpet and saxophone compression. So I'm going to bring up our another stereo aux input, and we're going to have the horn compression. So essentially the trumpet and the saxophone kind of work together dynamically, just as the whole rhythm section does. And I do want to separate the rhythm section from these lead instruments in a dynamic fashion. So let's see here, what do we got? I'd make it that pinkish red color. Call it horn brass compression. We're gonna put it on bus 5 and 6 and add ourselves both the trumpet and the saxophone. Making sure it doesn't add too much level. Now what we're going to do is pull up let's see here. We're going to do our FG red. We're going to try and just even out these transitions here between the normal parts and the solos. So right there you can tell that it's also drops a little bit in volume, which is fine. I just want to try and hit the compressor a little bit harder, even that out a little bit. It's definitely getting there. I like that attack and release time, and bring up the threshold just a tad bit more. Awesome, I'm liking that a lot. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of lower both of these here. A little bit in volume to just make it a bit more appropriate. Even a little bit more here. Awesome, and so there you have it. That was a bit of a longer episode here. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of instruments with kind of a lot of different needs. So this would be the end of episode 3, and our last episode will be tackling the guitar. I was going to do that in this episode, but we're already running pretty darn long here, so that's going to just add more time, but that'll be a good thing to add in our final episode, where we'll add reverb, kind of make everything sound like it's in a room, thicken everything up, add a little bit of saturation, and kind of bring this mix home. So hope you enjoyed this episode, hope you picked something up, and I will see you hopefully in episode 4. Until then, have a good one, guys.